It started as just another quiet day in Montecito. The California sun cast its golden glow over the sprawling estates, birds chirped in the distance, and the world outside seemed unaware of the storm brewing behind the gates of Harry and Meghan's home. To the public eye, everything appeared normal. But what no one knew was that within those walls, a single phone call had just set off a chain reaction that would change everything for Prince Harry, the Duke of Sussex. By midnight, Harry would be fighting for his life in a hospital bed. And hours earlier, Meghan Markle had allegedly picked up the phone and made a call to her lawyer, a call so secretive and so precise in its timing that it left even those closest to her asking one haunting question. Did she know what was coming? Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. Insiders now claim that Meghan's urgent request during that call wasn't about Harry's health. It wasn't even about their children. It was about the money. She allegedly instructed her legal team to begin the process of transferring Harry's personal assets into a private trust, away from royal eyes, away from public scrutiny, and, some say, away from Harry himself. Why would Meghan do this? Was it an innocent precaution to protect their family in case tragedy struck? Or was it a cold and calculated move to secure her own future in the face of a looming personal disaster? This is the story the palace doesn't want told. The story of a shocking betrayal, a desperate power play, and the question now on everyone's lips. When Harry needed Meghan most, was she truly there for him, or was she already preparing to walk away? The drama unfolded quickly, but the signs had been there for weeks. Friends of the couple spoke of increasing tension between Harry and Meghan. Behind the smiles at public events and carefully staged photo opportunities, whispers of arguments and long silences began to surface. Harry, they said, looked tired. Not the ordinary exhaustion of parenthood, but something deeper, a man weighed down by stress, uncertainty, and, perhaps, regret. Then came the day that changed everything. That morning, Harry reportedly woke up later than usual. Staff noticed he skipped breakfast and appeared distracted during a brief conversation with a security detail. Meghan, on the other hand, seemed unusually energetic, moving quickly from room to room while speaking in hushed tones on her phone. One staffer recalls hearing snippets of conversation. "It needs to happen now, no delays, keep it quiet." At precisely 3:15 p.m., Meghan locked herself in her study for nearly 45 minutes. Those familiar with the household say this was rare. She rarely spent time alone in that room, especially for that long. When she emerged, her expression was unreadable, but her tone to Harry was reportedly curt and businesslike. "We'll talk later," she allegedly said before heading outside to take a walk alone. Just 3 hours later, Harry was found unconscious. The call to emergency services went out at 6:41 p.m. Paramedics arrived within minutes and rushed Harry to a private hospital in Santa Barbara. Meghan accompanied him but kept her distance, speaking in whispers to her assistant throughout the drive. According to one witness, she seemed more focused on her phone than on Harry. This is where the story takes its most shocking turn. While Harry was being stabilized in the hospital, reports now allege that Meghan was once again on the phone with her legal team, finalizing instructions to move Harry's assets into a private trust. The move, if true, would mean Meghan was securing financial control, potentially leaving Harry vulnerable at a time when he couldn't defend himself. The implications are staggering. Royal experts are already speculating about Meghan's motives. Was this an act of love, an attempt to shield the Sussex fortune from greedy hands in the event of Harry's death? Or was it the first step in a premeditated plan to separate her financial future from Harry's, perhaps even preparing for a quiet divorce? Insiders close to the palace described King Charles as livid upon learning of the alleged call. One senior royal aide reportedly said, "If this is true, it's the ultimate betrayal." At his weakest moment, she was thinking about money, not Harry. And then there's Prince William. Sources say he reacted with icy fury, telling confidants, "I warned him this would happen." She's thinking only of herself. But Meghan's defenders insist the narrative is unfair. One friend insists Meghan was just being practical. If Harry didn't make it, she needed to make sure she and the kids weren't left at the mercy of the palace. This wasn't greed. It was survival. The public, however, remains divided. Social media has exploded with hashtags like #MeghanKnew and #JusticeForHarry. Talk show hosts are debating whether Meghan's actions were those of a devoted wife or a calculating opportunist. As the dust settles, one haunting question remains. What did Meghan know, and when did she know it? Was Harry's collapse a tragic coincidence that caught her off guard? Or had Meghan already seen the signs, prompting her to act swiftly, not for Harry, but for herself? And perhaps most chilling of all, if Harry hadn't survived that night, would anyone have ever discovered her secret phone call? This is only the beginning of a story that shakes the very foundation of trust and love in one of the world's most famous marriages. The morning air in Montecito was unusually heavy that day, as if the universe itself sensed something brewing beneath the surface. To neighbors driving by the Sussex estate, all seemed peaceful. The sprawling property sat behind its tall gates, perfectly manicured hedges shielding any glimpse of the lives within. Yet inside, the air felt tense, suffocating even, as Prince Harry and Meghan Markle moved through the motions of another day together. Harry rose later than usual. Those close to the couple say he had been struggling with sleep for weeks, plagued by vivid dreams and late-night pacing through the hallways. A staff member, who requested anonymity, recalled how Harry would often be seen sitting alone on the terrace at odd hours, staring blankly into the darkness, a steaming mug of tea cooling in his hand. It wasn't the Harry we used to know, the source shared quietly. He looked lost, like his spark had dimmed. On this particular morning, he barely touched his breakfast. The chefs had prepared as usual, scrambled eggs, avocado toast, and a small bowl of fresh fruit. But Harry simply poked at the food, his eyes unfocused. Meghan, meanwhile, seemed unusually brisk, scrolling through her phone with sharp movements and whispering into it every few minutes. She was in work mode, the staffer explained. She was giving instructions, sending messages, coordinating something. But she wasn't speaking to Harry much. It felt cold, almost transactional. As the hours passed, Harry retreated to his study. The room, a sanctuary of mahogany shelves and soft leather chairs, had become his place of escape. He surrounded himself with photos of his mother, Diana, her warm smile frozen in time, and the few reminders of a royal past he could not quite leave behind. Yet even here, the quiet was deceptive. Behind closed doors, Harry was wrestling with a growing sense of unease. Close friends say he had been feeling unwell for days. Headaches, dizziness, and a constant fatigue he couldn't shake. He had confided to one friend over the phone, "I don't know what's wrong with me. Maybe it's just stress. Maybe it's more." The same friend had urged him to see a doctor. Harry had agreed but never made the appointment. Meanwhile, Meghan continued her own routine, which that day included several private phone calls. At around 10:30 a.m., she walked out to the garden, phone pressed tightly to her ear. Her expression was unreadable, focused, sharp, and yet slightly tense. A gardener nearby overheard fragments of her conversation. "It has to be done today." "No, I don't want to wait." "Yes," discreetly. What was she discussing? The gardener assumed it was about a business deal or media project, as Meghan had been working tirelessly to relaunch her brand. But in hindsight, the timing of those calls raises troubling questions. By noon, Harry emerged from his study. Meghan greeted him with a quick, practiced smile but didn't engage in conversation. Instead, she handed her phone to her assistant and whispered something before striding off toward the kitchen. Harry lingered in the hallway for a moment, watching her go. His shoulders slumped as if weighed down by an invisible burden. Later, a staff member would recall the way Harry looked at Meghan that day. It wasn't anger. It wasn't even sadness. It was resignation. Like he wanted to say something, but couldn't find the words. The couple sat down for a light lunch together, quinoa salad with grilled salmon, but the atmosphere was strained. Meghan kept her phone within reach, glancing at it repeatedly as notifications buzzed. Harry barely spoke, answering questions with nods or brief words. At one point, he excused himself, claiming he needed fresh air. He stepped outside onto the patio, the ocean breeze brushing against his face. For a moment, he looked like a man trying to gather himself, inhaling deeply as if willing the world to slow down. It was in this quiet moment that Harry's bodyguard noticed something strange. The prince was swaying slightly, his hand gripping the railing for support. Concerned, the guard approached, but Harry brushed him off with a faint smile. "I'm fine," he said softly. "Just tired." But he wasn't fine. Around 2:45 p.m., Harry returned inside. Meghan was on yet another phone call, her voice low and urgent. She glanced at him briefly but said nothing, turning her back to continue speaking. Harry disappeared down the hallway toward his study once again. 15 minutes later, at 3:15 p.m., Meghan made the call that would later spark a media firestorm. She locked herself in her private office and spoke to her lawyer for nearly 45 minutes. No one knows exactly what was said, but multiple sources claim the conversation involved transferring significant portions of Harry's assets into a private trust. The timing is chilling. At that very moment, Harry was alone in his study, seated in his leather armchair, head resting in his hands. He had begun to feel lightheaded, a strange buzzing in his ears. He tried to stand but stumbled, grabbing the desk for support. Was Meghan aware of Harry's condition? Did she know he was spiraling physically while she finalized her financial instructions? Or was it all an eerie coincidence? By the time Meghan emerged from her office, Harry was no longer in the study. He had retreated to their bedroom, where he would later be found unresponsive. But at that moment, Meghan didn't seem to notice. She simply handed her assistant a piece of paper and instructed, "Have this sent immediately. Don't wait." The first domino had fallen. And within hours, the world would learn that Prince Harry, once the smiling boy who captured hearts across the globe, was fighting for his life in a hospital room, while Meghan's secret call hung over the story like a dark cloud. It was precisely 3:15 p.m. when Meghan Markle stepped into her private study and shut the door behind her. The soft click of the lock echoed faintly in the hallway, unnoticed by most of the staff, but not by her personal assistant, who paused briefly before moving on. Meghan rarely locked herself in that room. It was her sanctuary for moments of quiet planning, a place where calls were made and strategies drafted. But today, there was a weight to her actions, a sense of urgency that seemed to hang in the air like a thick fog. Inside, Meghan paced the floor, her phone clutched tightly in her hand. The curtains were drawn, blocking out the late afternoon sun, and the only light came from the screen she stared at intently. She took a deep breath and dialed a number, one she knew by heart. On the second ring, the call connected. "Good afternoon, Mrs. Markle," came the calm, professional voice on the other end. "We don't have much time," Meghan replied, her tone sharp yet low. "I need you to start the process immediately. Transfer everything we discussed. Don't leave anything behind." "Yes, of course," the lawyer answered. "But are you certain this is the right time? Such a move will attract attention, especially considering—" "I don't care about attention. It has to be done today," Meghan interrupted. There was a brief pause, and then she added, "No one can know until it's finished. Not Harry. Not anyone." For 45 minutes, Meghan remained in that room, her voice rising and falling in hushed tones as she navigated the conversation. Her assistant walked by twice, glancing nervously at the closed door, unsure whether to knock. Behind the heavy wood, the Duchess of Sussex was orchestrating what sources now describe as a complex and carefully calculated transfer of Harry's assets into a private trust, one that would place those funds entirely under her control. To the outside world, it might have seemed like a precautionary measure, a wife taking steps to secure her family's future in the face of uncertainty. But the timing was too precise, too coincidental to ignore. Just hours later, Harry would be fighting for his life in a hospital bed. What did Meghan know? As the call continued, Meghan's tone shifted from urgency to frustration. "We've talked about this before. I don't want delays. Move everything now: stocks, savings, properties, all of it. Make sure there are no loose ends." "Yes, Your Grace," the lawyer responded cautiously. "But what about the joint accounts? Those will require his consent." "Do what you can without him," Meghan snapped. "I'll handle the rest later." The conversation veered into technicalities that even seasoned financial advisors would struggle to follow. Offshore trusts, discrete wire transfers, legal loopholes, the language of the world's elite. But at its core, the request was simple: secure everything, and do it fast. By the time Meghan ended the call, her demeanor had shifted. Gone was the sharp edge in her voice, replaced by a cold stillness. She set the phone down on her mahogany desk, staring at it for a long moment as if weighing the consequences of her actions. Did she hesitate out of guilt? Or was it a moment of triumph, a quiet acknowledgement that she had just secured her position no matter what happened next? Minutes later, Meghan unlocked the door and stepped back into the hallway. Her assistant, who had been waiting nearby, handed her a folder. Meghan glanced at it briefly and nodded. "Send this to the address we discussed. Don't delay." "Yes, ma'am." As Meghan walked away, her assistant couldn't help but notice how calm she seemed, almost serene. It was as if the tension from earlier had evaporated, replaced by a steely determination. Meanwhile, in another part of the house, Harry sat alone in his study, unaware of the storm gathering around him. His health had been deteriorating all day, though he tried to ignore the warning signs. The headaches were growing sharper, and his vision blurred whenever he stood too quickly. But Harry, ever the stoic, chalked it up to stress. By 4 p.m., Harry tried to stand from his chair but felt his knees buckle beneath him. He caught himself on the edge of the desk, breathing heavily. "I just need rest," he muttered under his breath. At that moment, Meghan was reviewing documents in her room. One staff member later recalled hearing her say quietly into her phone, "It's done. We're secure now." The words were haunting in retrospect. When news of the call eventually leaked, the world erupted in speculation. Was Meghan simply being prudent, ensuring her family's financial stability in case Harry's condition worsened? Or was this the first step in a long-planned strategy to separate her future from his? Royal biographer Edith Langford weighed in during a televised interview. The timing of Meghan's actions raises troubling questions. If she truly had no idea Harry was about to fall gravely ill, then this is all a coincidence of staggering proportions. But if she knew, even suspected, then we're looking at something far more sinister. Public opinion was split. Some praised Meghan as a forward-thinking mother protecting her children. Others accused her of cold-blooded opportunism, arguing that no loving spouse would make such moves while their partner's health hung in the balance. But amidst the noise, one chilling fact remained. Meghan's phone call came hours before Harry was found unresponsive. And as the media frenzy grew, an even darker theory emerged, one suggesting Meghan's lawyer had been instructed to move Harry's assets not just in anticipation of a medical emergency, but in preparation for a possible separation. Meghan wasn't planning for Harry's death, one anonymous source alleged. She was planning for her life without him. Whether that's true or not remains a matter of fierce debate. But one thing is certain. This phone call, made in the privacy of a locked room, would ignite a firestorm that neither Meghan nor Harry could control. And it was only the beginning. By the next morning, whispers of Meghan's secret call had already begun to spread, carried like wildfire through the tight network of royal insiders and Montecito social circles. What had started as a single, hushed conversation behind closed doors was now on the brink of becoming a full-blown scandal. It wasn't long before journalists caught wind of the story. At first, it seemed too outrageous to believe. How could Meghan possibly have arranged such a transfer of assets at a time when Harry was fighting for his life in a hospital bed? What could have compelled her to act so swiftly and secretly, mere hours before his collapse? But then came the leak. A well-placed source, someone familiar with the Sussex household's inner workings, reached out to a tabloid reporter under the condition of anonymity. The source described the scene in startling detail, Meghan pacing her study, the sharpness in her voice as she gave her lawyer instructions, and the calmness that settled over her once the call ended. She wasn't panicked, the source insisted. She was determined. It was like she knew exactly what she was doing, and exactly why she had to do it then. As the story broke across media outlets, the public's reaction was swift and visceral. Social media exploded with theories, hashtags trending worldwide, hashtag Meghan knew, hashtag Harry betrayed, and hashtag Sussex scandal. Some defended Meghan fiercely, claiming she had been protecting her children's inheritance from royal interference. Others accused her of being cold, calculating, and self-serving. But what made the revelation even more explosive was the nature of the transfer itself. According to documents obtained by investigative journalists, Meghan had not only instructed her lawyer to secure her and Harry's joint assets but had also moved to isolate a significant portion of Harry's personal funds into a private trust. This trust, reportedly set up in Meghan's name alone, would give her sole control over the money in the event of Harry's death or incapacitation. It was a financial maneuver so precise, so carefully executed, that even seasoned lawyers were impressed by its efficiency. Yet the timing cast a dark shadow over Meghan's intentions. Royal commentator Anthony Whitmore didn't hold back in his televised analysis. It's one thing to make plans for the future. That's what spouses do. But to execute such a move mere hours before your partner collapses with a life-threatening condition? It doesn't sit right. The optics are catastrophic. Even within the royal family, tempers flared. King Charles was reportedly incandescent with rage upon learning of Meghan's actions. A senior courtier claimed, His Majesty said this is exactly the kind of ruthless behavior he feared when Harry married her. There's a sense of betrayal that in Harry's hour of need, Meghan was thinking not of her husband's life, but of his fortune. Prince William's reaction was even more pointed. I told him this would happen, he allegedly confided to a close friend. I warned Harry she'd only look out for herself in the end. But was it truly betrayal? Meghan's supporters offered a different perspective. One close friend, speaking to a sympathetic journalist, argued that Meghan was acting out of love and fear. She was terrified, the friend said. If something happened to Harry, she didn't want to be left powerless. She had to make sure she and the children were secure. This wasn't about greed. It was about survival in a system that has never welcomed her. Still, critics remained unconvinced. Why, they asked, did Meghan need to act so secretly? Why was Harry himself kept out of the loop? And if her intentions were pure, why not wait until after his health crisis had passed? The questions only multiplied when a second leak revealed in even more chilling detail. Meghan's lawyer had asked during the call whether this transfer should also include Harry's ancestral titles and properties in the UK. Meghan's alleged response was cold and clear. Leave those. They're of no use to me. To many, this suggested that Meghan was preparing for a life beyond Harry. One free of royal ties and obligations, but well secured financially. As these revelations dominated headlines, public outrage reached fever pitch. Pundits called for investigations. Talk shows debated whether Meghan should face legal consequences. Even Meghan and Harry's staunchest allies began to question the Duchess's judgment. And yet, in the midst of the uproar, Harry remained silent. At the hospital, he was reportedly still recovering, unaware of the full extent of Meghan's actions. Nurses described him as subdued, speaking little and asking often for privacy. One nurse recalled him staring out the window for long stretches of time, his face a mask of quiet pain. Did he suspect? Did he know even then that the woman he loved had made moves that could sever the last threads of trust between them? If Harry didn't know at that moment, he would soon. And when he learned the truth, it would break him in ways no one could have imagined. This was no longer just a story about a secret phone call. It had become a question of loyalty, love, and the fine line between protection and betrayal. The sun was beginning its slow descent over Montecito, bathing the Sussex estate in hues of gold and amber. It should have been a tranquil evening, but inside those guarded walls, a silent storm was raging. Harry had been feeling increasingly unwell throughout the day. At first, it was just a dull headache, the kind he thought could be cured by hydration or a moment of rest. But as the hours passed, his discomfort evolved into something more sinister. A strange dizziness crept in, accompanied by waves of nausea and a heaviness in his chest that made each breath feel like an effort. Despite the warning signs, Harry brushed off concerns. When a member of his security team asked if he needed assistance, Harry forced a faint smile and replied, "Just tired, mate. Nothing a bit of fresh air won't fix." But those around him could see the difference. He wasn't himself. His skin had taken on a pale, almost ashen quality, and there was a distant look in his eyes as though his thoughts were somewhere far away. It was shortly after 6 p.m. when Harry retreated to his study, hoping for a moment of solitude. He sank into the leather armchair by the window and stared blankly at the fading light outside. The garden, so vibrant and full of life, seemed a world apart from the turmoil building inside his body. Across the house, Meghan was on another call. Her voice carried faintly down the corridor, though her words were indistinct. One staff member, passing by, noted the urgency in her tone. She seemed calm, almost too calm, as though whatever she was discussing had been rehearsed. At 6:25 p.m., Harry tried to stand. He had felt a sharp, stabbing pain in his head, so sudden and intense that it left him momentarily disoriented. His hand shot out instinctively to steady himself against the edge of the desk. But as he pushed himself upright, his knees buckled beneath him. He collapsed to the floor with a soft thud that reverberated in the quiet room. For a moment, there was only silence. Then came the faint sound of labored breathing, shallow, uneven gasps as Harry struggled to stay conscious. His vision swam. He reached weakly for his phone on the desk, but couldn't muster the strength to pull himself up. Minutes passed. It was only when his bodyguard, concerned that Harry hadn't responded to a knock at the door, entered the room that the alarm was raised. The sight that greeted him was one he would later describe in hushed tones. Harry sprawled on the floor, eyes half open but unfocused, his lips tinged with a faint bluish hue. "Sir? Can you hear me?" the guard asked, his voice tight with urgency. When Harry didn't respond, the guard didn't hesitate. He called out for assistance, his voice echoing down the hallway. Within moments, the household was thrown into chaos. Staff members rushed to the study, and Meghan appeared at the doorway, her expression unreadable. "He's not breathing properly," the guard said as he dialed emergency services. "We need an ambulance immediately." Meghan stepped forward, clutching her phone. For a brief second, her fingers hovered over the screen as if debating whether to make another call. Then she turned and muttered to her assistant, "Keep them away from the press. No one must know yet." Paramedics arrived at 6:41 p.m., their sirens cutting through the evening calm as they pulled up outside the estate. Harry was stabilized and placed on a stretcher, his body limp, his face pale under the harsh lights of the emergency equipment. "Possible cardiac event," one paramedic said into his radio as they prepared to transport him. Meghan followed closely but maintained a calculated composure. One paramedic later confided to a colleague, "She wasn't hysterical like you might expect. She looked controlled, focused." As they sped towards Santa Barbara Cottage Hospital, Harry's condition remained critical. The paramedics worked quickly, administering oxygen and monitoring his vital signs. Every so often, Harry let out a faint groan, his body reacting to their efforts to stabilize him. In the back of the ambulance, Meghan was seen tapping rapidly on her phone. One paramedic recalled catching a glimpse of her screen and seeing a string of messages sent to someone labeled simply legal. The timing raised uncomfortable questions. Was Meghan already preparing for a worst-case scenario? Or was she simply managing the situation in the way only she knew how, with precision and strategy? As the ambulance pulled into the hospital, the air was thick with tension. Harry was rushed into the emergency room, medical staff swarming around him. Meghan, allowed into a private waiting area, continued to make calls. Witnesses described her demeanor as composed but distracted, her eyes darting between her phone and the door where doctors periodically emerge with updates. "His condition is serious, but we're doing everything we can," a doctor informed her. Meghan nodded silently, her fingers still clutching her phone. Back at the Sussex estate, the staff were instructed to maintain absolute silence about what had transpired. "If anyone leaks this, they're finished," Meghan's assistant reportedly warned. But it was already too late. News of Harry's hospitalization began to circulate among local emergency responders. Within hours, the story would hit the headlines, though the full truth of what had led to Harry's collapse and Meghan's actions in those critical hours was still hidden from the world. For Harry, unconscious in his hospital bed, the immediate fight was for survival. But for Meghan, the battle had already shifted to something else entirely: control of the narrative, control of the assets, and control of a situation spiraling rapidly out of hand. This was not just a medical emergency. It was the spark that would ignite a scandal of unprecedented proportions. The timeline of events surrounding Harry's collapse and Meghan's secretive actions has become one of the most scrutinized and debated subjects in recent royal history. To the untrained eye, the sequence might appear as an unfortunate coincidence. But to those who have studied the events carefully, the alignment of Meghan's phone calls and Harry's rapid health decline suggests something far more complex and potentially troubling. It begins with the early hours of that fateful day. At 8:30 a.m., Harry was reportedly awake but sluggish. He lingered in bed longer than usual, his energy low and his responses muted. According to one staff member, when Meghan entered the room to discuss the day's schedule, Harry barely looked up from the pillow. He seemed drained, the staffer said. You could hear it in his voice, like he hadn't slept properly for days. By 10 a.m., Meghan had left the bedroom and retreated to her private office. Witnesses say she began a series of phone calls, some lasting only a few minutes, others stretching longer. The assistant stationed outside the office noted that Meghan's voice carried an urgent tone, though her words were indistinct. Between 10:30 a.m. and 1 p.m., Harry attempted to go about his usual routine. He walked the grounds briefly but had to stop several times to catch his breath. A gardener working nearby described seeing Harry pause, hands on his knees, as if fighting dizziness. By 2 p.m., Harry was inside his study, sipping tea and scrolling through his phone. At least 2 staff members later confirmed seeing him rub his temples repeatedly, wincing as if in pain. At 3:15 p.m., Meghan made the phone call that would later rock the monarchy. For 45 minutes, she was locked in her office, speaking in hushed but determined tones to her lawyer. This was the moment she allegedly instructed the immediate transfer of Harry's personal assets into a private trust, a move that, though not illegal, was highly unorthodox given Harry's unknown medical status at the time. At approximately 4 p.m., Harry attempted to stand from his chair but stumbled. His breathing was reportedly shallow, and his complexion had turned pale. A bodyguard stationed nearby asked if he needed help, but Harry waved him off. By 6:25 p.m., Harry collapsed. The alignment of these times has led royal watchers and medical experts alike to ask, did Meghan know something about Harry's condition before he did? And if so, why didn't she act to get him help earlier? Dr. Thomas Halbridge, a leading neurologist unaffiliated with the royal family, weighed in during a televised interview. If the reports are accurate, the symptoms Prince Harry exhibited suggest a gradual decline throughout the day, a process that could have been intercepted with proper medical intervention. The question is why no one close to him, including his wife, sought that intervention sooner. Adding fuel to the fire was a leaked email timestamped 5:10 p.m., reportedly sent from Meghan's assistant to her lawyer's office. The message read, "All paperwork prepared and waiting for signature," confirming urgency as discussed on the call. This revelation triggered outrage among Harry's supporters. How can anyone justify focusing on financial documents while your spouse is visibly deteriorating? Asked royal commentator Sylvia Barrett on her evening talk show. At best, it shows a stunning lack of empathy. At worst, it suggests she was preparing for the unthinkable. Defenders of Meghan pushed back hard. They argued that the Duchess was under immense pressure and had to make swift decisions to secure her family's future. She didn't know he was going to collapse, insisted one close friend. She was being prudent. She didn't want to be left unprotected if the worst happened. But even these defenses couldn't erase the nagging questions about timing. Royal aides, speaking off the record, pointed out that Meghan had ample opportunity to notice Harry's declining condition during the day. "It's not like he hid it," one said. "He wasn't himself. He looked frail. If she cared, why wasn't her first call to a doctor instead of a lawyer?" This question grew even louder after it was revealed that Meghan had asked her lawyer during the 3:15 p.m. call about contingencies should Harry become incapacitated. The language, described as clinical by the source who leaked the detail, chilled many observers. Was Meghan's call a panicked reaction to subtle signs of Harry's illness? Or was it a calculated move, made with full knowledge of the crisis to come? A timeline so precise, so layered in questionable decisions, left even seasoned royal analysts struggling to make sense of it. By 7:30 p.m., Harry had been admitted to the hospital. Meghan, sitting in the waiting room, reportedly made another call, this time to her publicist. "Control the story," she allegedly instructed. "No leaks. Not yet." But by then, it was too late. The world was beginning to piece together a narrative Meghan could no longer contain. This was no longer just about a medical emergency. It had become a mystery, a scandal, and for Harry, a life-altering moment he would never fully recover from, no matter how much his body healed. And as investigators began pulling on the threads of this timeline, they would uncover even more unsettling details about Meghan's financial maneuvers that day, and what they might have meant for Harry's future. As the hours ticked by in Santa Barbara Cottage Hospital, Prince Harry remained unconscious, his body still battling the mysterious medical crisis that had overtaken him. Meanwhile, in a quiet corner of the waiting room, Meghan Markle sat with her phone in hand, eyes fixed on the screen. To those passing by, she appeared calm, composed, even, but inside her head, a complex web of plans was already spinning. This was not the first time Meghan had spoken to her lawyers about Harry's financial affairs. In fact, sources later revealed that these conversations had been happening in fragments for months. But on this particular day, just hours before Harry's collapse, something shifted. What had been idle discussions about future-proofing suddenly became urgent action. To understand the magnitude of Meghan's alleged financial maneuver, one has to first look at the scope of Harry's assets. Although Harry stepped back from his senior royal duties, he had not walked away empty-handed. He brought with him a personal fortune, inherited primarily from Princess Diana's estate and a share of funds left in trust by the Queen Mother. Estimates put Harry's net worth at around £25 million, not including future earnings from media ventures and book deals. Then there were the joint Sussex assets, their sprawling Montecito mansion, valued at an estimated $14 million, several lucrative media contracts with streaming giants and publishers, and various investments quietly managed by financial advisors in Los Angeles and London. In total, it was a financial empire substantial enough to raise eyebrows if any part of it were suddenly moved or restructured. And that's precisely what Meghan allegedly set in motion during her now infamous 3:15 p.m. phone call. The call was made to a senior partner at a discreet Beverly Hills law firm known for its work with Hollywood's elite. The partner had previously helped other celebrities establish private trusts and shell companies designed to shield assets from public scrutiny and from prying family members. "Begin the process," Meghan reportedly said. "Move Harry's personal accounts first. Then we'll handle the shared properties. I want this watertight." Her instructions were clear, precise, and chillingly efficient. But what made this move so shocking was its timing. Harry was still at home, slowly succumbing to a condition no one seemed to fully understand, and yet Meghan's priority appeared to be securing the wealth they had built together. The legal mechanism she ordered involved transferring funds into what's known as a blind trust. This type of trust places control of assets into the hands of a trustee, allowing the beneficiary, in this case, Meghan, to indirectly manage them while shielding the details from outside observers. This wasn't some basic will update or casual estate planning, said financial analyst Peter Hargrove. This was a sophisticated asset shift designed to protect and consolidate wealth in the event of incapacitation or death. But was it protection or preparation? For Meghan's defenders, the move was nothing more than prudent planning. One friend insisted she was terrified for Harry. The stress they've endured, the security threats, the constant media harassment, it was all weighing on her. She wanted to ensure that, should anything happen, she and the children wouldn't be left vulnerable. It wasn't greed. It was survival. Yet critics pointed out that Harry had not been consulted about these changes, nor was he given the opportunity to approve or reject them. Moving assets without Harry's explicit consent is deeply problematic, explained British barrister Jonathan Smythe. Even in a marriage, both parties are expected to be informed of major financial shifts unless legal powers of attorney are in place, and we have no indication Meghan possessed such powers. The revelation that Meghan's lawyer had also discussed moving funds into offshore accounts in jurisdictions such as the Cayman Islands and Luxembourg added another layer of intrigue. Offshore trusts are often used for privacy and tax advantages, but their association with secrecy only fueled the growing public suspicion. Why hide money overseas if your motives are innocent? Asked royal commentator Eleanor Grayson on a late-night news panel. It doesn't add up. If she was truly acting in Harry's best interest, why the cloak and dagger approach? As journalists dug deeper, they uncovered emails from Meghan's legal team marked urgent and timestamped within an hour of her initial call. These documents outline steps to separate certain properties from joint ownership, effectively insulating them from Harry's family and from any legal entanglements that might arise should Meghan decide to leave the marriage. She was preparing for every scenario, a source close to the investigation claimed. If Harry survived, she'd still have control. If he didn't, she'd be untouchable. The news hit Buckingham Palace like a thunderclap. King Charles, already under immense pressure from public duties, was reportedly livid. "This is beyond belief," he told aides, according to one source. To move his assets as if he were already dead? It's monstrous. Prince William's reaction was equally furious. "This is why I never trusted her," he allegedly said in a private moment. "She's always 3 steps ahead, playing the long game. And Harry's too blinded to see it." But perhaps the most heartbreaking part of this financial web was Harry's own ignorance of it. While Meghan orchestrated transfers and drafted agreements, Harry lay unconscious in a hospital bed, his fate uncertain. Would he have approved of her actions had he been aware? Or would he have felt betrayed? That question lingered heavily in the air as the story unfolded, leaving royal watchers and the public alike divided in their opinions. What began as a single phone call had now evolved into a scandal of global proportions, intertwining love, money, and power in a way no one could have imagined. And as Meghan's lawyers quietly worked behind the scenes to finalize the transfers, another bombshell loomed on the horizon, one that would shatter what little trust remained between Harry and the woman he once believed would stand by him through anything. As the world began to unravel the details of Meghan's covert financial moves, all eyes turned to one figure at the center of the storm, her lawyer. The seasoned Beverly Hills attorney, known in elite circles for discretion and efficiency, had become a reluctant player in a drama he never expected to leave the shadows. Reporters camped outside the law firm's sleek glass headquarters, their cameras ready to capture even a flicker of movement. Legal experts debated on television panels about whether he might be compelled to comment. But for days, there was silence, an eerie, unyielding quiet that only intensified the public's fascination. Behind closed doors, the lawyer was reportedly fielding hundreds of calls from journalists, royal watchers, and even private investigators hired by tabloid newspapers. His assistants were instructed to use stock responses for every inquiry. "We can neither confirm nor deny representation of any individual client." But the speculation only deepened when an anonymous source from within the legal world leaked fragments of a conversation allegedly held between Meghan and her attorney just hours before Harry's hospitalization. She was very direct, the source claimed. She made it clear she wanted immediate action. There wasn't time for the usual due diligence or back-and-forth approvals. She said, "Move forward now. I don't want to risk delays." The chilling implication was clear. Meghan had ordered her lawyer to act with unprecedented speed and secrecy, bypassing normal safeguards that would have required Harry's explicit knowledge and consent. At first, Meghan's legal team denied any wrongdoing. In a rare statement, a spokesperson insisted, "All actions taken by this firm on behalf of our client are entirely consistent with U.S. and international law. We reject any insinuation of impropriety." But that statement raised more questions than it answered. If everything was above board, why not clarify the nature of Meghan's instructions? Why refuse to say whether Harry had been consulted about these sweeping asset transfers? And why had Meghan's lawyer requested non-disclosure agreements from every staff member who handled paperwork related to the transactions? Royal biographer Lydia Carrington put it bluntly on a live news program. This lawyer isn't just protecting Meghan. He's protecting himself. If the public knew the full extent of the financial maneuvers Meghan initiated that day, I think the outrage would reach a level we've never seen before. Legal analysts pointed to the possibility that Meghan's attorney was operating under a silent trust arrangement, one in which even the primary beneficiary, Harry, may not have been informed of the changes until much later. "This is rare," said Simon Dalrymple, a London barrister with expertise in royal finances. "It's usually done in situations where one spouse fears the other might contest the decisions." For Meghan's team to have gone down this path suggests they were preparing for resistance, or perhaps even a legal battle. But while the lawyer remained silent in public, the pressure on him was mounting. Behind palace walls, King Charles was reportedly weighing his options. Could the royal family pursue legal action to reverse the transfers? Would they even have jurisdiction over funds now held in complex offshore structures? "It's like trying to unpick a spider's web," said one financial expert consulted by the palace. "These trusts are designed to be virtually untouchable." Adding to the intrigue was a leaked internal memo from Meghan's law firm, sent just 2 days after Harry's hospitalization. The memo warned staff to avoid discussing high-profile client matters, even with family and close friends, citing the extraordinary global media scrutiny surrounding the case. The language suggested the firm knew it was handling a volatile situation, one that could tarnish even its own sterling reputation if mishandled. Meanwhile, Meghan's critics seized on the silence as proof of guilt. "If there's nothing to hide, why won't her lawyer speak plainly?" asked one pundit during a primetime debate. The public deserves answers. This isn't just about money. It's about trust, loyalty, and the fate of a man who has already been through more than most of us could endure. But others argued that the lawyer's silence was exactly what Meghan was paying for. "This is what top-tier attorneys do," said legal analyst Marjorie Klein. "They absorb the heat so their clients don't have to. Don't expect a confession. Expect stonewalling, denials, and airtight confidentiality." Still, rumors persisted that Meghan's attorney had been approached by investigators in the UK seeking to understand whether any part of Harry's estate, particularly funds tied to British trusts, could have been moved without breaching domestic laws. If true, this development could signal the beginning of a larger battle, not just between Meghan and the royal family, but potentially between Meghan and the very legal system she had so skillfully navigated. For now, though, the lawyer remained silent. His reputation was built on it. But silence can only hold for so long. As one royal insider ominously put it, "Secrets this big don't stay buried forever. And when they surface, they tend to destroy everyone in their path." The news of Meghan's secret financial maneuver, timed so precariously with Harry's sudden hospitalization, hit Buckingham Palace like a thunderbolt. For decades, the royal family had weathered scandals, betrayals, and even constitutional crises. But this felt different. This wasn't just about the monarchy's image. It was about the life of a son, a brother, and the possibility that the woman he had chosen to share his life with was already preparing for his absence. When King Charles received the first confidential briefing from a senior courtier, his face reportedly drained of all color. "What do you mean she transferred his assets?" he asked, his voice taut with barely restrained anger. The courtier, carefully choosing his words, explained that multiple sources had confirmed Meghan's lawyer had moved significant portions of Harry's personal fortune into a private trust, mere hours before his medical collapse. Charles sat in silence for a moment, fingers steepled beneath his chin. Then, in a rare outburst, he slammed his palm against the table. This is beyond betrayal. It's exploitation, pure and simple. Those present in the room later said they had never seen the monarch so visibly shaken. For Charles, this was not merely a financial or legal issue. It was personal. He had long struggled to repair his relationship with Harry, and now it appeared that reconciliation might be out of reach, not because of his own failings, but because Harry's wife may have driven a wedge too deep to remove. Prince William's reaction was even more visceral. When his private secretary informed him of the situation during a quiet afternoon meeting at Kensington Palace, William reportedly rose to his feet in shock. "She did what?" he demanded, his voice echoing off the high ceilings. The rage in William's eyes was unmistakable. Those closest to him said he had warned Harry countless times about Meghan's ambition and single-mindedness. To him, this was the culmination of every fear he had ever voiced to his younger brother. "I told him this would happen," William allegedly confided to a trusted friend later that evening. "I told him she'd put herself first in the end. And now look where we are. Harry's fighting for his life, and she's already planning for a future without him." But William's anger wasn't directed solely at Meghan. There was also a deep, simmering frustration at Harry himself. He refused to listen, William said. He chose her over everyone, over family, over duty, over common sense. And now we're all paying the price. In the days following Harry's hospitalization, royal aides convened urgent meetings to discuss the potential fallout. The Queen Consort, Camilla, urged caution. "We don't know the full picture yet," she reportedly said. "We mustn't act on emotion alone." But Charles and William were less inclined to wait. According to insiders, both father and son consulted with their own legal teams to determine if any part of Harry's fortune, particularly funds tied to royal trusts or properties, could be legally shielded from Meghan's reach. Early reports suggested that the bulk of Harry's inheritance from Diana and the Queen Mother had already been moved to the private trust Meghan had set up. "This isn't just about money," Charles told his advisors. "It's about principle. If she's done this without his knowledge, there must be consequences." Behind palace walls, there was also a growing sense of fear, not just for Harry's health, but for what might come next if he recovered and learned the truth. "What happens when Harry wakes up and discovers she's moved his assets?" one senior aide asked. Will he forgive her? Or will this be the moment he finally sees her for what she is? But not everyone within the family was convinced of Meghan's malice. Princess Eugenie, who had maintained a warm relationship with Harry and Meghan, reportedly urged her cousins to refrain from passing judgment too quickly. "None of us knows what she was thinking," Eugenie said during a private phone call with William. "Maybe she was scared. Maybe she thought she was protecting the children. You don't know until you're in her shoes." William's alleged response was icy. "No, Eugenie. You don't move someone's fortune if you're scared. You call a doctor. You call family. That's what love looks like." Meanwhile, palace communications staff were working overtime to manage the growing media frenzy. Newspapers across Britain ran headlines like "Duchess's Secret Plot" and "Did Meghan Betray Harry?" The hashtags #MeghanKnew and #ProtectHarry dominated social media platforms worldwide. The royal family's public response was restrained but pointed. A brief statement from Buckingham Palace read, "We remain deeply concerned for the Duke of Sussex's health and are in close contact with his medical team. We will not comment on speculative reports regarding financial matters at this time." But behind closed doors, Charles and William were preparing for war. According to insiders, Charles considered convening the Privy Council to discuss whether Harry and Meghan's titles could be reviewed in light of these revelations. If she's acting like this while he's vulnerable, what's stopping her from doing worse in the future? Charles reportedly asked. William, meanwhile, was said to be pushing for a more direct approach, reaching out to Harry's doctors to gain clarity on his brother's condition and possibly intervening to protect whatever portion of Harry's estate remained untouched. But for now, all they could do was wait, for Harry to regain consciousness, for Meghan to make her next move, and for the world to decide where its sympathies truly lay. This wasn't just a family conflict anymore. It had become a battle for the very soul of the House of Windsor. And in the quiet halls of Buckingham Palace, one chilling question hung in the air. If Harry survives, will he return to Meghan's arms? Or will he finally see her as the woman who almost cost him everything? As news of Meghan's secret financial moves spread like wildfire, the public's response was swift, intense, and deeply divided. What began as a speculative leak had now exploded into an international scandal that dominated headlines, television broadcasts, and online forums. For millions around the world, the story became more than a royal controversy. It was a lightning rod for debates about trust, loyalty, and power in relationships. By dawn the next day, the hashtag #MeghanNew was trending globally on social media platforms. Angry tweets flooded in from all corners of the world, accusing Meghan of cold-blooded calculation. She moved his fortune before he collapsed? That's not love, that's strategy. Harry gave up everything for her, and this is how she repays him. Protect Harry. Someone needs to save him from her. In London, crowds began to gather outside Buckingham Palace, holding placards that read, "We stand with Harry and stop the betrayal." One woman, interviewed on live television, tearfully said, "Harry has been through enough pain in his life, losing his mother, leaving his family, and now this. It's heartbreaking." Across the Atlantic in California, Meghan's supporters rushed to her defense. The hashtag Meghan protects her family also began trending, with allies arguing that Meghan's financial actions were prudent steps to safeguard her children's future. She's a mother first. Why wouldn't she protect Archie and Lilibet from royal vultures? If the tables were turned, no one would question Harry doing the same. This is about survival in a world that's hated her since day one. Talk shows and news panels became battlegrounds for opposing narratives. On one side were those painting Meghan as a schemer, a woman who saw Harry's vulnerability as an opportunity to cement her own independence. On the other side were voices who framed her as a savvy, modern woman forced to navigate the toxic dynamics of an ancient institution. Even longtime celebrity friends began to weigh in. Oprah Winfrey, who had hosted the couple's bombshell interview years earlier, remained silent, refusing comment despite mounting pressure from the press. Meanwhile, Piers Morgan, one of Meghan's most vocal critics, took to the airwaves in a fiery tirade. This isn't about protecting her family, it's about protecting herself. She's moved Harry's money because deep down, she doesn't think he'll pull through, or worse, because she doesn't want him to. His words sparked outrage among Meghan's fans but resonated with those already suspicious of her intentions. As the debate raged on, new leaks added fuel to the fire. An anonymous hospital staff member revealed that while Harry was in critical condition, Meghan had been spotted in the hospital's private lounge, speaking in hushed tones to someone on her phone. She wasn't crying. She wasn't even upset. She looked focused, like someone conducting business. Another source claimed that Meghan had instructed her assistant to draft a press release while waiting for updates on Harry's condition. Though these reports remained unverified, they were enough to ignite public fury. In Montecito, Meghan's mansion became a fortress. Security patrols were doubled as protesters gathered outside the gates, shouting slogans and demanding answers. Back in London, British tabloids launched blistering attacks. Headlines screamed, "Duchess of Deceit? Meghan's secret plot? Love or betrayal? Harry deserves better." Even the normally restrained Times ran a sobering editorial. If these reports are true, they raise serious questions about the Duchess of Sussex's judgment and motivations. At a moment when her husband needed care and compassion, was she instead focused on securing her own future? For the royal family, the backlash was both a blessing and a curse. While they privately shared many of the public's concerns, they were also keenly aware that the monarchy could not be seen as openly attacking Meghan without appearing vindictive. "The palace is walking a tightrope," said royal correspondent Amelia York. "They don't want to alienate Harry further, but they can't ignore the public outcry either." Behind the scenes, advisors urged King Charles and Prince William to remain silent until Harry recovered. "Let the public speak for you," one senior aide advised. "Their voices are louder than anything we could say right now." And speak the public did. Petitions began circulating online, calling for Harry to be rescued from Meghan's influence. Others demanded that Meghan be stripped of her Duchess title, arguing that her actions were incompatible with the dignity of the royal family. Yet through it all, Meghan remained silent. No interviews, no statements, no social media posts. For some, her silence was further proof of guilt, a cold, calculated strategy to ride out the storm. For others, it was a sign of dignity, a refusal to dignify baseless accusations with a response. But as the world debated her motives, one truth was becoming increasingly clear. Public opinion was turning against her in a way not seen since the early days of her royal marriage. And as Harry lay in his hospital bed, unaware of the chaos unfolding beyond the walls of his private suite, the question loomed larger with each passing hour. When he wakes, will he still see Meghan as the woman he sacrificed everything for, or as the architect of his undoing? For days, Meghan remained silent as the world erupted around her. Headlines screamed betrayal, royal aides whispered of disgrace, and even former friends seemed to distance themselves from her name. Yet behind the tall gates of her Montecito mansion, Meghan was not panicking, not outwardly. She understood the optics were terrible. She knew the world believed she had moved Harry's money in the hours before his collapse for selfish reasons. But in her mind, she was justified. According to a close confidant, Meghan's explanation for her actions was simple. She was acting as a wife and mother first. She felt cornered, the friend said. The truth is, Meghan never fully trusted the royal family with Harry's legacy. She feared if something happened to him, the palace would swoop in and leave her and the children with nothing. In Meghan's view, this wasn't betrayal. It was foresight. She did what she felt she had to do, the confidant continued. Harry is her husband, but she's also a mother to 2 young children. In her mind, she wasn't protecting herself, she was protecting Archie and Lilibet. When pressed on why Meghan hadn't sought Harry's consent for the asset transfer, the friend grew defensive. Harry wasn't well. He had been deteriorating for weeks, and Meghan was watching him spiral. She knew he wouldn't want to talk about money in that state. It wasn't about hiding it from him. It was about making sure they were secure if the worst happened. But critics weren't convinced. She's spinning it as maternal instinct. But what kind of wife thinks about money first while her husband is collapsing? Asked royal commentator Henry Ashton on a live panel. This wasn't a knee-jerk reaction. The level of planning involved suggests she had this lined up for some time. As the storm raged on, Meghan's legal team quietly crafted her defense. Behind the scenes, her attorneys began drafting a statement for release if public pressure grew unbearable. Though the statement never officially went out, a draft leaked to a sympathetic journalist revealed Meghan's planned narrative. I acted as any wife would in an uncertain and terrifying moment. My only concern was protecting our children and ensuring Harry's wishes were respected should the unimaginable occur. Any suggestion that my actions were motivated by greed or malice is not only false but deeply hurtful. This wording struck a nerve with her detractors. They're already trying to paint her as the victim, said one palace aide. But if she really believed Harry was in grave danger, why didn't she call a doctor instead of her lawyer? Even as Meghan prepared her defense, reports emerged suggesting she had reached out privately to select media allies, hoping to shape the narrative. Anonymous sources close to Meghan began appearing in online publications and tabloid columns, insisting that the Duchess was devastated by Harry's condition and furious at how her intentions were being misrepresented. She's heartbroken, said one such source. She feels like she's being vilified no matter what she does. If she had done nothing and something happened to Harry, people would have accused her of negligence. She can't win. But Meghan's actions in the hours immediately following Harry's collapse were harder to explain away. Hospital staff leaked details of her behavior in the private waiting area. She had made several phone calls, reviewed documents on her tablet, and at one point, been overheard saying, "I need this finalized today." Meghan's defenders insisted she was merely handling logistical matters under extreme stress. But to others, it looked like cold calculation. This wasn't the behavior of a distraught wife, said royal biographer Claudia Fenton. This was someone who had already shifted into damage control mode, long before the world even knew Harry was in danger. The divide in public opinion grew sharper with each passing hour. For every voice condemning Meghan, there was another defending her fiercely. You can hate Meghan all you want, but the palace never wanted her there in the first place, said one commentator on a popular podcast. They stripped her of protection, they fed her to the wolves. And now she's being crucified for doing what any rational person would do, making sure her kids don't lose everything if Harry dies. But the narrative wasn't entirely in Meghan's control anymore. As Harry's condition stabilized, questions began swirling about whether he had been informed of the asset transfers. Royal aides hinted that Meghan's actions could damage her relationship with Harry beyond repair. If he wakes up and finds out she moved his fortune without telling him, one source said grimly, that might be the breaking point. In private, Meghan wrestled with the decision of whether to tell Harry the truth or wait until he was stronger. Her closest advisors urged caution. Don't upset him now, one lawyer reportedly advised. Wait until he's fully recovered. You can explain later. But the truth had a way of seeping through cracks. And as Meghan prepared her defense for the public, she didn't realize the real battle would not be fought in newspapers or online forums. It would be fought in Harry's heart when he learned what she had done. As the days unfolded, the public's fascination with Meghan's actions deepened. Analysts and commentators pored over every detail of the timeline, examining her decisions through the harsh lens of suspicion. To some, Meghan's maneuvers appeared logical and even admirable, a woman taking decisive action in an uncertain situation. But to others, her behavior raised an unsettling question. Was there more to her financial moves than she was willing to admit? Whispers began to circulate in Montecito's elite social circles that Meghan had long been consulting legal and financial advisors about future-proofing her position. One acquaintance described a conversation she claimed to have had with Meghan months earlier. She said, "You never really know what's going to happen in life, especially when your partner has enemies everywhere," the acquaintance recalled. At the time, I thought she was just being cautious. But now I wonder if she was planning her escape all along. That theory gained traction when investigative reporters uncovered a paper trail suggesting Meghan had quietly established her own separate financial accounts months before Harry's health crisis. According to leaked bank records, significant sums of money from joint Sussex ventures had been redirected into these accounts under Meghan's name alone. This isn't something that gets set up overnight, said financial expert Gareth Reynolds on a televised panel. It takes weeks, sometimes months, to create the type of trust structures Meghan allegedly put in place. It points to a long-term strategy rather than a spur-of-the-moment decision. The possibility of premeditation sent shockwaves through royal watchers. Was Meghan preparing for a future without Harry? Or was she merely ensuring she wouldn't be left vulnerable if their marriage faltered? Royal biographer Elaine Crawford described Meghan's strategy as brilliant in its precision and devastating in its implications. She has, effectively, insulated herself from any potential fallout, Crawford said. If Harry had passed away, she would have been financially untouchable. If the marriage dissolves, she's already secured her share of the fortune. Either way, she comes out ahead. But Meghan's defenders bristled at such speculation. Why do we always assume the worst of her? Asked Meghan's friend and former colleague, who spoke to a U.S. magazine under the condition of anonymity. She's a woman operating in a world that has been hostile to her since day one. She's seen what happens to women who don't take precautions. This isn't about greed. It's about survival. Still, the timing of Meghan's phone calls and asset transfers couldn't be ignored. Multiple sources confirmed that her lawyer had specifically inquired about the implications of Harry becoming permanently incapacitated during their discussion. That's not language you use lightly, said barrister Michael Harwood. It suggests she was considering contingencies that went beyond a mere health scare. It suggests she was preparing for a scenario where Harry might never recover. To many, that chilling detail cemented the narrative that Meghan had acted in her own interests first. Inside Buckingham Palace, this theory was echoed by more than one senior aide. She saw an opportunity, one whispered. She may not have wished Harry harm, but she was certainly ready to benefit if harm came to him. The idea of Meghan engineering an exit strategy was not entirely new. Rumors had swirled for months about tension in the Sussex marriage. Insiders spoke of increasing arguments between Harry and Meghan behind closed doors. She loves him, but Meghan is pragmatic to a fault, said a source familiar with the couple's dynamics. In her mind, love doesn't mean putting yourself at risk. If things turned sour, she wanted to make sure she wasn't the one left empty-handed. Public reaction to these revelations was fierce and polarizing. Meghan planned this like a corporate merger, wrote one commenter online. She played chess while Harry played checkers. Others accused critics of misogyny, arguing that Meghan was being unfairly demonized for making moves that would be lauded if done by a man. This is classic double standards, said one supporter. If Harry had secured assets for Meghan and the kids in case of tragedy, people would call him a loving husband. But because Meghan did it, she's a gold digger. Still, the most haunting question lingered like a shadow over the entire saga. If Harry's health crisis had escalated further, if he hadn't survived, how soon would Meghan have enacted her plans? And would anyone have ever known the full truth about her motives? The more the public speculated, the more Meghan's silence seemed calculated. She had not spoken a word in her own defense, choosing instead to let her allies and legal team shape the narrative. But behind Meghan's tightly controlled exterior, Sources say she was deeply aware of how precarious her position had become. "She's not stupid," said a family friend. "She knows Harry is the only reason she has the platform she does. If he feels betrayed, if he decides to pull away, everything she's built could crumble overnight." And yet, for all her careful planning, Meghan may not have accounted for one variable: Harry himself. If Harry woke to find that his wife had moved his fortune and prepared for life without him, would his love for her be strong enough to survive that revelation? Or would Meghan's hidden motives finally come to light in the one place she couldn't control, his heart?